The goal of this video is to add a random flicker to text. The challenge is to do it procedurally. Have a look at the render settings while we add a text object to the scene and rotate it 90 degrees about the x-axis. Next, use the extrude setting to give the text some volume and the depth setting to add some bevel to it. Then go to the Google Font website, download a font and select it here in the font settings. Note that you have to hit Tab to edit the text. Finally, add a material to the text object and give it a proper name. Now, head over to the shading viewport. Once here, delete the principled BSDF shader. Now that we have a blank canvas, I'm going to start by adding a few nodes to the setup, and once we have something working, I will then go through the nodes one by one and explain what each of them does, so bear with me. To get things going, use the Add menu and the Search field to find and drop in an emission shader node, a glossy BSDF, a layer weight, a map range, and a mix shader node. The facing output of the layer weight node outputs a value of 0 if the mesh is directly facing the camera. This output goes towards 1 when the mesh faces away from the camera. Feeding this facing output into the map range node allows us to remap those values. We then use the remapped value to control the mix shader. With the mix shader, we can proportionally combine two different shaders into a single shader. Here, we're using the emission and the glass shader nodes, which are only two of many built-in shader nodes available in Blender. In our setup, parts of the mesh that face away from the camera will be more of an emission shader, while those parts of the mesh that face towards the camera will mostly use the glass shader. This set of nodes will make the text look like a neon sign. Now to make the neon text flicker and turn on and off randomly, use the Add menu and the Search field to bring in a value, a noise texture, and a map range node. The noise texture node, when set to 1D, will give us a random value between 0 and 1. We can then use this random value to determine whether the neon sign should be on or off. Turning the flicker on or off is done using the map range node. The on or off state depends where the input random value sits in relation to the from min and from max values. We can see how the flicker effect works by slowly scrolling the value node, but a better way is to animate the value node. We can do this either by adding keyframes or by using a simple driver. I'm going to use the latter approach and add a driver to the value node by typing in the hash sign followed by the expression frame divided by 10. Now press the spacebar on your keyboard to play the animation. You can use the scale value of the noise texture node to set the frequency of the flicker, while the parameters of the map range node determine how often the sign will be on or off. I'll show you how to make these parameters more user-friendly soon, but before that, to organize the shader setup, let's go to the Add menu and drop in a frame. Then right-click on the frame to give it a proper name. Now, select the value node and the noise texture node and drag them onto the frame. Do the same thing for the map range node and the emission node. Finally, add a third frame to hold the user-friendly parameters of the flicker effect, and don't forget to give it a proper name. Now, add a value node, drop it onto the frame, and press Shift D to duplicate it. Then add a math node. The first value node determines the threshold between the on and off states. If the random number generated by the noise texture is larger than this threshold, the sign will be turned on. Lower values for the threshold means that the sign will be on more often. The second value node determines the range between the on and off states. The smaller this value, the quicker the sign will change between on and off states. Now, there's one interesting thing we can do with these parameters. We can animate them. So for example, using the threshold value, we can make the neon text flicker for a short while and then turn on. To do this, bring up the timeline view and add 2 keyframes to the threshold value. At frame 0, set the threshold to 1 and add a keyframe by right-clicking on it. This means that the sign will initially be turned off. Then, at a later frame, set the threshold to 0 and add another keyframe. Now press spacebar to play the animation and watch the sign flicker before it completely turns on. You can find more procedural shaders on my channel, and don't forget to subscribe to get notified about new videos. As for this one, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.